Hey guys, I'm Matt, and welcome to this overview of the Pointing Ninja of Z mystery. This case is the predecessor to the later established HUNDEGNI mystery, which will be briefly touched on at this video's end. The primary purpose of this analysis is to inform you of the important investigative steps and findings which had previously occurred on PlayStation Home and various other sites, and to lay the groundwork for many other important pieces of the information to follow. Don't worry, you don't need to understand everything here right away. There's a video right after this one which touches on the story elements of the mystery, and then a third video that details the general timeline. It's the combination of all three of these videos that allows for things to really make sense. Now then, let's hop right into things. For simplicity's sake, we'll start with a pivotal game called Z, or XI. XI made history as being the world's first console-based alternate reality game, or ARG. It started in 2009 and ran for a total of 12 weeks on the online social platform PlayStation Home, inviting people all across the world to engage with each other over various mysterious puzzles, videos, challenges, and the like. When Z finally ended, a new public space was created to honor it, called the XI Museum. Many things transpired beyond this point, though once again for simplicity we'll skip ahead to mid-2012, when an individual named Dominic chose to explore the old museum, only to come across a particularly strange individual at the center of the museum itself. Dominic found a user called DHeart67 who, dressed as a golden ninja, crouched and repeatedly pointed towards the museum's entrance. It was a bizarre sight and not easily achievable, as the pointing ability in Home required the pressing of several different buttons and constant human attention. While Dominic initially ignored this behavior, he'd go on to return hours later, still finding the individual to be crouching and pointing as if no time had passed at all. His interest piqued, Dominic would speak to DHeart67, asking him what he was doing, only for the ninja to immediately stop pointing and utter the phrase 5890 before instantly disappearing. This 5890 message will become much more important later. In any case, with DHeart now gone, Dominic became more interested in learning what 5890 meant and what the ninja was pointing at specifically. Days later, Dominic would return to the museum, this time finding a completely new user at its center, dressed the same and once again pointing and crouching, though this time simply named XI Museum, in accordance with the space itself. Speaking to the ninja again only resulted in the same 5890 message and disappearance as before, once again leaving Dominic in the dark, though he would go on to create multiple entries online laying out his process of discoveries. It's thanks to these entries that this video could even be constructed, and if you're interested in those finer details, a link to all of the entries can be found in the description. Just be aware that much of the information will be outdated at this point or contain leads to dead ends. Interestingly enough, not long later came a new space called XI Continuum, the long-awaited sequel to the 2009 XI. Surprisingly, no references to the ninjas or to 5890 were found within the new space whatsoever, though Dominic refused to call it quits, assembling a small team of friends to help him search for clues on the matter. One of these helpers was called To The Max 9, or simply Max, and will be important to all of this at a later time, just keep him in mind for now. The discovery suddenly heated up as yet another pointing ninja was found within XI Continuum, named XI Continuum. His clothing was slightly different, though still resembling a ninja to some degree. His face was also impossible to make out within the darkened space of the XI Continuum warehouse. Just like DHeart67 and XI Museum before him, Continuum pointed towards seemingly nothing but a blank wall, and would reply with only 5890 when spoken to or pointed back at, before vanishing, indicating whoever was controlling him had to physically turn off the console immediately after talking. Now, skipping ahead a bit, the early investigators came to find out that by looking at XI Museum's or XI Continuum's profile descriptions, they could find a link to an outside website simply called pointing.webs.com, which is encrypted in binary, but when translated simply seemed to indicate that the investigators needed to tell the ninjas the phrase, "Take me to your apartment." Every user on Home was given their own special apartments, and thinking all they had to do was simply regurgitate this phrase to the ninjas, the investigators once again tracked one down at his seemingly random period of operation. Unfortunately, this phrase resulted in no difference whatsoever, as the ninja still immediately vanished after saying the 5890 phrase. The mystery was far from over. Now, while all this was happening, another strange figure by the name of Y2HHAXJZ was contacting Dominic and some of his fellow investigators, sending them creepy messages, including pictures taken of the friends' idle avatars without their knowledge, and seemingly random photos taken of certain places all around home. Each separate message counted down from 9 to the eventual 1, which finally revealed a link to a hidden video on a YouTube channel named Bread Soup Co., which would come to be a hotspot for all Pointing Ninja related videos in the future. The video, simply called Gone, featured some creepy whistling and a photo of what would become known as the Arrows of Heaven logo. Once again, all of this will be important later. It's also worth pointing out that Y2 appeared only once during the entire investigation, staring quietly at the prominent stapler statue within the museum before eventually departing. As if all of this wasn't enough, the investigators soon came to meet with a user named HUNDEGNI, which is Pointing Ninja spelled backwards. Yes, it's missing an N, but that was later discovered to be intentional for reasons that will become clear later. HUNDEGNI, or simply AJ as the investigators referred to him, was seemingly distrusting of the investigators, indicating he knew information after searching for a long time, but simply refused to elaborate much beyond that. Despite AJ's hesitance or vague replies regarding the ninjas, he would go on to confide in one of Dominic's co-investigators called Admiral. Among the information he'd go on to leak to Admiral, AJ would specifically mention how ninjas were not the only ones involved in the mystery, and that avatars called shadows also operated within the museum and the continuum. These shadows were basically explained as lackeys whose only purpose was to stand completely silently within a location, keeping watch over everything that transpired within it, specifically studying the investigators themselves. More importantly, AJ would also explain that Admiral had been chosen by the ninjas and shadows, and that he had a greater purpose in solving everything. This would seemingly indirectly mean that Dominic, who was once the most likely chosen investigator, either ran out of time or did something incorrect during his period of investigating, and the title of chosen investigator had now moved on to another. There are other possibilities at play here, but those are best left to another video entirely. Oddly enough, Jin also expressed interest in meeting a shadow who could speak, but he once again did not elaborate as to why exactly, at least not yet. Things began taking a turn for the stranger when Max, one of Dominic's earliest helpers, suddenly quit the investigation and PlayStation as a whole, citing vague personal reasons, and not even giving his fellow investigators time to react. He'd also go on to remove those close to him from his friend list entirely. Remember this, it'll come in handy later. A while afterwards, and by complete accident, Dominic stumbled across a hidden message which could be found by clicking the center of the Arrows of Heaven logo found in the Gone video. This message informed investigators that they needed to tell Y2HHAXJZ the odd phrase, "Don't cut our wings." Upon doing so, Y2 sent a whole new message, this one giving the investigators a specific link to an online quiz involving multiple facets of Z, PlayStation Home, and Pointing Ninja trivia. Upon completing the quiz, the investigators came to find yet another new link which led to yet another hidden video on Brett Supko's YouTube channel, this one bizarrely entitled .webs.com, which we'll come back to in just a minute. What's important to mention is that over time the investigators encountered more and more of the shadows AJ had been referencing. To summarize some of them, there was Golden Shadow King, RHK DMS, King of the Sun 5, and General Camera. Most all of these shadows fit the bill of not speaking or moving while also displaying wrinkled and freckled faces, piercing blue eyes, and the clothing of new users. They also possessed no visible PlayStation trophies, and their avatars were simply of bows and arrows. Some exceptions to these attributes were found in King of the Sun 5 and General Camera's accounts, who instead had an eye avatar and an added phrase of "We search for the truth." AJ also displayed this profile image. Additionally, General Camera was special in that she actively moved around both the museum and the continuum, taking photos seemingly at random while doing so. But that's not all, as one other common shadow would appear exclusively in the museum, DHeart67. You may remember him as the original Pointing Ninja Dominic had came across at the very beginning. DeHart no longer dressed in the Golden Ninja outfit, instead wearing a black futuristic suit of some kind, which was odd among shadows as they did not prominently wear such unique outfits. His profile was also distinct as being a simple smiley face, though little else separated him from the other silent shadows that had been cropping up at random. Now we go back to AJ, as the investigators soon learned from both appearance and AJ's own words that he was aging and would be gone soon. Fascinatingly, this may explain why his name, HUNDEGNI, is spelled incorrectly, as the missing N caused the first few letters of his name to be read as Ajing, or, that's right, aging. Sometime later, AJ surprised everyone by inviting Admiral over for a personal conversation, something he had not gone out of his way to do before. The purpose of this meeting and the details held within it were, well, pretty sad, as AJ finally revealed he used to work with General Camera in King of the Sun 5, which is why they all had the same sun profile picture. They were in a group called Eyes in the Sky. He elaborated that the group investigated the Pointing Ninja of Z, but eventually fell apart. This reached its peak when King of the Sun 5, AJ's closest friend, ended up cracking the case and finding something that is simply referred to as IT. This IT had been brought up prior quite a bit as being a reward for finishing the investigation, though no one was sure what it entailed. In any case, upon finding IT, King of the Sun 5 vanished entirely, leaving the user, who would come to adopt the name HUNDEGNI, all alone, where he spends the rest of his days striving to find out what really happened to his friend. This is why AJ was so interested in finding a shadow who could speak. He wanted his friend back, but it appeared that he had now run out of time or broken a certain rule. After explaining these details to Admiral, AJ went offline and has never resurfaced. Even with that piece of the puzzle somewhat solved, the investigators were still left wondering what really happened to King of the Sun, and if Admiral was indeed chosen, as AJ claimed, could that mean Admiral was doomed to disappear next and become a shadow? It took time, but eventually the .webs.com video was solved as the investigators found hidden words and messages in the video itself, which, to make a long story short, eventually gave the investigators the link to yet another website entitled pointingninjawatcher.webs.com. Once on this new site, the investigators came to find another code which, when translated, sent them to, you guessed it, another site called arrowsofheaven.webs.com. which, as you'd expect, exhibited even more codes ranging from solving binary to translating French, ultimately revealing a form of to-do list for the investigators to follow from then on. Now, while all this was happening, a new shadow surfaced unlike any other. This one was going by the name of Unhinged Shadow, who moved erratically while constantly sending out crazed messages and bizarre outbursts. Among these outbursts, Unhinged mentioned that he was freed by someone who he called AJ. Investigators were quick to realize that AJ's final actions may have involved somehow getting this shadow to break. Unhinged would go on to make multiple appearances, gradually but surely growing more sane with each encounter, occasionally dropping insightful pieces of information. He'd go on to explain what Arrows of Heaven was, which, if you haven't caught on by now, is the organization that the Shadows and the Ninjas were a part of. Interestingly, Unhinged also hinted at someone called the Suited Man, who was briefly referenced by AJ some time ago in an old conversation but never explored beyond that until now. Unhinged brought up this Suited Man constantly, criticizing him and his actions without giving away too much. What was clear now was that the Suited Man was in control of AOH and that he could not be trusted. Taking a step back a bit, remember Max, Dominic's original assistant, who suddenly left the investigation for personal reasons? He finally ended up making a comeback, but in a way no one had seen coming, as it is finally revealed that Max, or To the Max 9, had been turned into a shadow, as he now possessed the wrinkles, freckles, and newcomer clothing mentioned before, also refusing to speak or move from his place in the museum. Already saddened by this unexpected and mind-boggling loss, Dominic, Admiral, and the other investigators soon came to find out that Home was closing down for good in just a few months, forcing the investigators to push things into high gear with the time they had left. One day, upon finding General Camera once again in the museum, Admiral actively decided to try and engage in conversation with her, urging the former Eyes in the Sky member to break free from Arrows of Heaven and the controlling force that the suited man seemingly imposed. Shockingly, upon continuously offering this encouragement, the Shadow did at several points open up a dialogue box, though ultimately didn't go through with it. That was until the two met yet again and Admiral tried the same tactics. That time, against all odds, General Camera finally spoke. Her only word? Sorry. She then immediately went offline, never to resurface again. With time running out, conversations with the slowly recovering Unhinged Shadow were vital in piecing together the rest of the puzzle. Surprisingly, after one conversation with Unhinged, investigators received a photograph, seemingly involving the suited man standing in the background, despite the fact that nobody was there when Admiral saw Unhinged take the photo. Much later in the investigation, two other photos of the suited man would surface, but none of which revealed his face. As shadow sightings slowly declined, investigators were shocked to come across a brand new shadow in a different part of the museum than usual. This shadow was called Trooper for Good. Unhinged would call this particular shadow rare. He possessed all other typical shadow attributes, though he did have a different profile image than that of the bow and arrow. This indicated to investigators that Trooper was yet another former investigator who'd been turned into a shadow. This was also seemingly confirmed when Admiral went on to highlight the entire page on pointingninjawatcher.webs.com and found 3 hidden names located at the bottom of the page. The names are as follows: King of the Sun 5, DHeart67, and Trooper for Good. Now, using the context of these 3 names and previously known facts regarding King of the Sun, it was finally decided that these 3 people were the previous chosen investigators who discovered the mysterious It. This starting out with King of the Sun 5, continuing with DHeart67, and ending most recently with Trooper for Good. And now they only remained as shadows. Unlike General Camera, none of them would come to break. Meanwhile, thanks to the to-do list provided by arrowsofheaven.webs.com, the investigators came to find out that they needed to capture something called the Butterfly, and, like clockwork, a new shadow who could fly and express emotions through bowing and other gestures appeared around both the museum and the Continuum. This shadow went by the strange name of Operation PN. Attempts at catching this shadow proved initially futile, as he evaded Admiral's every movement, eventually ending with him escaping from Admiral altogether on multiple instances. Not long after this, Unhinged met one final time, alone with Admiral, now more clear and controlled than ever before. He proceeded to inform Admiral how the shadows used to be free before the suited man changed everything. He reminisced that he missed his old friends, of which he includes Brett, Golden Shadow King, RHK DMS, Operation PN, and yes, even the suited man. This reveals who the original founders of Arrows of Heaven were before Eyes in the Sky, DHeart, Trooper, or Max got inducted. This was the original group. Unhinged, in sadness, also revealed the role of Brett in the investigation, and how he was, in essence, the first pointing ninja before he met a real-life fate in a car accident. Now, here, as the conversation reached its closing, Unhinged revealed how he blamed himself for these issues, and how he wished to spend the rest of his days trying to make up for sitting still while the suited man took control of the whole system. And with that, he left. The physical absence of Unhinged was only the beginning, however, as he soon came back to post a video publicly to the Brett Suko YouTube page, this one entitled Compass Rose, which features a mysterious soundtrack and visuals, as well as an avatar who looks practically identical to a djinn, as he's slowly corrupted and torn apart. Its purpose may have been to inform investigators of the shady things AOH did behind the scenes, but concepts like that are best left to other videos. Not long afterwards, Admiral finally managed to spot Operation PN once more in the museum, and this time, instead of chasing him, stood perfectly still. This act of silent behavior actually resulted in the butterfly approaching Admiral, and upon doing so, ended up giving him a blessing, which is precisely what the next step in the to-do list said needed to happen. With this step completed, the only one which remained said that the message must be delivered to the silent one. However, no one was really sure what message in particular this could mean, leaving the team practically clueless. Not much more time had passed until Unhinged once again resurfaced with an external website, featuring his likeness and a story revealing the roots of Arrows of Heaven in a symbolic manner. I'll go ahead and make it clear now that most of what this site reveals is best left to be explored in the story half of these overview videos. All you really need to know is that Brett became the first pointing ninja of sorts in the original XI, and thus began behaving strangely, as well as creating the term 5890. This behavior led to Brett and the soon-to-be founders of Arrows of Heaven to get into a heated argument that ultimately ended with Brett's tragic car wreck. In response, the Mourning Friends created Arrows of Heaven to freely remember Brett. But all this changed when the Suited Man demanded order amongst the crew, ultimately tying them down and making himself into the leader. Also hidden on the website is a link revealing the hidden photo page on pointingninjawatcher.webs.com. These images will be more important in the HUNDEGNI investigation years later though. Ultimately, the investigators were unable to find the correct message to relay to the pointing ninja, who they assumed was the silent one, and unfortunately, that's how it stayed. Home finally closed down on April 1st of 2015. Finally ending the investigation just as the investigators had nearly reached their goal. However, as a spectacular send-off, Y2HHA-XJZ went on to send Dominic a message during Home's final day, only consisting of a link to the last known hidden video on Brett Supko's YouTube channel. This final upload, simply named PN, replayed multiple key moments in the investigation, be it flashbacks to the first XI or the museum and continuum. The ninjas themselves were shown as well during dozens of their pointing sessions in their respective locations. Even brief glimpses of the hidden websites and past investigators make it on screen. It is revealed through the video that King of the Sun 5 had cracked the case by telling the ninja the old phrase, "Take me to your apartment." The code from the original pointing.webs.com site, which investigators had almost completely forgotten about at that point. This is why saying the phrase before didn't work. They had yet to achieve the other task to do in the to-do list. King of the Sun 5 is then shown as having been taken to an apartment where he is told that he will learn the truth but also change. What was this change? Well, it was none other than becoming Y2HHA-XJZ, as it is revealed through transitions and how the two avatars look alike, though Y2 is simply the aged version. It is presumed that this is the grand reward that had been teased, and it certainly was not a pleasant one. Had the investigators successfully solved the mystery, it's extremely likely some of them, or most of them, would have been made into shadows, meeting the exact same fate as so many others before them. Also featured in this video was that of a chair with a shadowy X placed above it. Though there's no further evidence to back it up aside from a previous Y2 message, it's widely believed that this chair was in XI Museum's and XI Continuum's apartments, and that sitting in it was the final step in being integrated into AOH. This chair was the mysterious It. And so, the video came to a close, featuring only that of a young man in a photograph. This is assumed to be Brett, the one who started it all, and now, the one who finished it all. AOH seemed to vanish into thin air upon Home's closing, likely due to their primary platform being gone, the shakeups and leaks caused by AJ and Unhinged, as well as certain sites and the YouTube channel being repossessed by these rebellious members. This was considered the absolute end for years, until HUNDEGNI came out. But that's for a future video. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is where the investigation overview comes to a close, and quite frankly, I think it's great that not only did this investigation bring people together and get them to think, but it actually helped draw attention to a story that needed to be told. As I mentioned before, you didn't have to understand everything here in order to move forward. The next video I recommend you check out is the story overview, which highlights the broader scope of the events that transpired from 2009 to 2015. And following that is simply a quick timeline video that clears up events in chronological order. Thanks for making it this far, and thanks to everyone who's helped make these videos possible. That's all for now, guys. Matt, out.